Hi, everyone. Welcome to PeopleMetrics Live. Today, we'll be reviewing the critical 5 patient needs when onboarding to new medications. And before we dive in, let's go ahead and do some quick introductions. My name is Kirk Lobauer. I've been an account manager here at PeopleMetrics, running a number of our patient experience and feedback programs, and I'm here to share my expertise. And I'm joined by our CEO, Sean McDade. And Sean, I'll turn it over to you if you want to do a quick intro.
Hi, everybody. Sean McDade, founder and CEO of PeopleMetrics. Excited to be here today.
All right. Well, thank you for spending some time with us today. So, Sean, when I think of this space, a lot of companies talk about patient centricity and they talk about meeting their patient needs. And they do a lot of things. They have apps, portals, and support teams. And just from your perspective, how well do you think these pharma companies are doing at meeting those patient needs?
Well, I think the good news is there's a lot of effort towards doing so, right? So there's a lot of engagement around, especially new patients onboarding onto medications, right? So patient support services, there's huge investments in it. It's continued to grow each year. Lots like you said, lots of digital investment and lots of investments in hubs and call centers and other ways to engage patients. So I think the good news is we're seeing great momentum towards supporting the patient in their journey and supporting the HCP partner in that journey as well with their patient. From the data that we've seen, and we've been doing this a while, like we've been working with pharma companies, right, for the last 6 or 7 years in just patient support services for many other years in other areas. And the data we're seeing is, there are certain core needs that pharma is doing a good job meeting and others maybe not. So the good news is we've identified what we think is, the 5 core patient needs when adopting a new medication, onboarding them to a new medication. So it's controllable. But I'd say that, pharma is just in the beginning of their journey in really creating great experiences for their customers. And I think this is a great, area to focus on because first of all, it's such high leverage, right? We know when patients onboard, they're obviously, you can't adhere unless you onboard to begin with. And then your medical outcomes are much better, the sooner you onboard and, the more that you're able to adhere to the treatment regimen. So this is a great way to create a great customer experience. And in my new book, Pharma Customer Experience, Kirk, coming out in November, which is exciting, there's many chapters on how, important patient support services is and how these needs are the core of what patient support services needs to fulfill in order for a patient to be ready to onboard onto a new medication.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback on that, it really is the sense that I think we've gotten in the past 6 or 7 years is that it is in its infancy, because from the pharma company's historic perspective, meeting patient needs has just been, I've created this therapy, and that's the patient need being met, and then it's on everyone else. It's on the HCPs, it's on the caregivers, it's on the hospitals, it's on everyone else to actually make sure that the access and the therapy is there for you. However, kind of as we're approaching this new world of patient support services, you do have to evolve in that thinking of meeting your needs isn't just providing the therapy, it's making sure you are kind of actually onboarding, getting access to it. That's I think framework.
Without a doubt, Kirk. I mean, every industry now is moving towards experiences of their customers. The experiences that your customers have dictate the success of the future of your company. And, in the book, I make a point that even in product launches, it shouldn't be about the product, it should be about the experiences the customers have. Customers in this case, primarily the patient, as well as other key stakeholders being HCPs, caregivers that you mentioned. And, thinking about the patient's journey, onboarding onto a new medication with patient support services being a key pillar to that is, it's a no-brainer to me. And that's why there's so much investment in it, because there is a return. We're seeing more and more onboarding, data from the more patient support services is invested in, which is a great sign. But it needs to be managed like any other customer experience is managed in a bank or in a hotel or in a call center. You have to think of it the same way, that your patient has a journey with multiple touch points and needs that you have to identify and fulfill. And if you don't fulfill them, you need to know about them, course correct, and make it right.
Yeah, and I think something a very interesting point that, of course, we're going to get to in this approach is, evolving out of this mindset of I'm just delivering a product means I'm delivering an experience, and part of that, it goes even just beyond customer experience. It's almost a human or psychological. I need to meet your needs, which it can tie back in a very base way to. I think I'll pull it up now, but kind of what you've referred this great framework for folks to think of it is this Maslow hierarchy of needs. So I think if you're ready for it, Sean, I'll go ahead.
Yeah. So just before you put it up, like, like you said, fundamental human needs have been studied for a long time, right? And, Maslow has a hierarchy that, probably many people who are watching this know, but it's worth kind of just reviewing real quick. But the fundamental part of the framework is, one level, it's on a triangle, but one level of need is paramount. And until that need is fulfilled, the next level doesn't really matter, right? So there are these core needs where, and you can put that up now. There are core needs that as a human, if they're not fulfilled, nothing else really matters. And we're seeing parallels in the world, which we'll get to in a second. But this is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So as humans, right, physiological needs such as being able to breathe and have food and water, you'd be pretty focused on that if you didn't have that. And things like self-esteem isn't going to be on your mind. Right? You're going to be focused on, how do I get food, how do I get water, and how do I get home, right? And then after those sort of basic needs are fulfilled, then your mind starts, and most humans' mind starts going into, okay, now that I got that, I want to make sure I have a job. I want to make sure I have more resources. I want to make sure my health is good. I want to make sure, I have some sort of longer term security in some way, whether that's financial or psychological or whatever, right? And after they're fulfilled, then you start thinking about, oh, I want to have friends, and I want to have a family, and I want to have a significant other or whatever. Then the feelings of love and belonging start. But after you have that, the theory goes, then it's things like, am I fulfilling my potential from achieving what I can achieve? And am I confident? Am I respected in the community? And then the ultimate need is, according to Maslow, is self-actualization, where you're basically operating at your highest self, right? From a morality perspective, you're creative, you have a purpose, you're solving problems that matter. You're basically reaching your potential as a human and basically contributing to society at the same time, right? So that's the idea. But you're right, Kirk, if you didn't have a place to live and you didn't have enough food every day, you contributing to society probably wouldn't be on your mind.
Yes, I think this, if the power goes out in my house, or if I'm out of groceries, that's the first thing. I'm not going out and seeing people. You need to serve these very baseline needs first. Otherwise, that's just a constant distraction before you can move on to all of these other elements. And that's, fundamental to everything else that I can do and enjoy, is the sense that the base of this pyramid is there.
And the really interesting thing is, we saw a similar kind of framework and needs come about as we've done all this work around listening to patients and HCPs around the patient support experience that they've had over a number of years. And we've seen these kind of core needs emerge, and then we've seen sort of higher order needs also emerge that, frankly, all of them need to be fulfilled in order for a patient, your customer, to onboard onto a new medication. So what we're going to show next is the same type of framework, but just put into sort of a patient's lens, and what needs do a patient have when they're onboarding onto a new medication. And we call this the Patient Support Services Hierarchy of Needs. So these are the needs that your patients have before they'll be ready to onboard onto a new medication. And they have to be fulfilled, Kirk, whether this is a high touch, rare disease, or orphan product, case manager approach to patient support services, or if it's sort of a broader mass market product that doesn't require as much high touch, but these needs still need to be fulfilled. They just are fulfilled in different ways.
That's a great point. Because fundamentally, this pyramid is through the lens of from the patients that we've heard from, what do they need? And it doesn't matter the style of support services that they receive. It's what do I fundamentally need when I'm getting support from you? What needs to be provided? All right, well, why don't we jump on?
Let's go with the base one. Remember we talked about food and air and water, right? For humans, for patients, it's financial security. So when they're considering onboarding into new medication, they think, can I afford this? Or I can afford this is actually the affirmative that you'd want them to say. And this is why a lot of patient support services dollars have gone into this access kind of level of copay, helping with copays, understanding insurance options, start forms, claims verification, helping HCPs with pre-authorizations, all that stuff, right, would go into, yeah. Right, and this makes sense, right, Kirk? Without this, nothing else, then it doesn't really matter if you can't get this need fulfilled.
Exactly, and to your point, I think this is often the first step for a patient, kind of after they've been diagnosed with after they've been diagnosed and they're looking to receive therapy. Kind of one of the first things they have to find out is, what's my coverage, and how do I actually afford this? So before you move on to any other step, a patient has to feel, or a caregiver has to feel, I understand how this is going to incorporate into the way I can daily afford the life that I live. And this is where, of course, a lot of these support teams and access teams invest a lot of their resources.
Without a doubt, and it's that investment is well spent, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say, certainly from my experience with working with other patient support teams, they tend to do very, very well at this phase of the pyramid.
We're going to find out next time when we dive into this with questions and benchmarks and all that. There'll be a future PeopleMetrics Live on each level of this hierarchy.
Yeah, I can't give away too much of the game here, but
no, but and of course, all of this is detailed in my new book, Pharma Customer Experience. There's actually a chapter on each one of these levels, which is coming out in November.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, certainly something worth noting, as far as the awareness of these teams, the awareness of support teams is there, that this is a need that I need to meet. And
right.
As we're going through this pyramid, the awareness isn't always there, but on this fundamental, it's certainly there.
Right. Let's go to the next. Okay, so once the patient feels like, hey, I can afford this, then there's the next level. And that's what we call the need of logistical support. So we want the patient to say something like, I know how to get my medication and I can get it in a reasonable time frame, right? Mm-hmm. So this is about knowing, where to go to receive the medication. So for rare disease drugs, right, this is a huge one, right? Especially, if it's delivered at a third party center, being able to go there, how do I get there? Is there any travel assistance? If it's going to a pharmacy, which pharmacy do I go to? How do I get there? If it's a specialty pharmacy, that's yet another level, right, Kirk? So mm-hmm. This seems like it makes sense, of course, but this experience has to be scripted and created for the patient in order for someone to onboard. So you have to think about what are the logistical hurdles your patient may be going through to obtain the medication, and how can you help and support them in kind of making those hurdles go away?
Yeah, and I think that's a great way. It's a great thing you mentioned. That I know we've mentioned this on previous PeopleMetrics Live, but the patient or the customer is going to have this experience whether or not you define it. The
Right.
patient is going to need to, find out which of the pharmacy is easiest for me to access, and they're going to have kind of hurdles in their day to day to logistical access to their medicine that they're either going to do with or without you. Now, for some of our, if it is a very complex therapy, as you were saying, where it's an infusion, it's only in specialty pharmacies, you do need to be very defined, where some of our clients have. If you go traveling, we will help you find to wherever you're traveling, where is the nearest therapy to you. So that's not work that's on you. That's something where you have a trusted partner to get you there. But even for mass market therapies, you don't want to have to think through much of this logistical support. So as much as you can have a partner there to help you with refills, with access to the medication, that's a big that's support that they see and value.
And when we do our PeopleMetrics Live on this, we'll go into some out-of-the-box ways that you might be able to help patients, obtain the medication via some travel ideas and other kind of pieces I have in the book that I think are at least fun to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the out-of-the-box thinking is very important, because it really is. I think what we find when it comes to this pharmaceutical range of customer experience, it is a matter of changing your mindset. You want to think out of the box of not just how can it's not just a matter of making a drug anymore. It's how do I make that process of accessing therapy as seamless as possible for our patients.
Okay. So after we have this hurdle taken care of, then we have the next need, which is, how do I administer this medication, right? You want the patient to say, I know how to administer this medication. Again, for rare disease, this is a huge one. If it's an injectable, it's something that, can be complex. If it's an inhaler, it can be complex, potentially. Even with mass market products, it's around, how do I consume it? How often do I consume it? What do I consume it with? What are some interactions that I can't, what are some things that I can't take with it? This need is just fundamental across any product. And, you can go from like nurse educators going into homes of patients for highly complex drugs, right? To more informational digital type offerings for all other products. So this one's a huge need. I mean, you have to be able to afford it. You have to know where to get it. And then you have to know how to administer it. Those are the three fundamental patient needs that we keep saying over and over again.
Yeah. And I think, something I'd note about this one is that you can never be too clear. And I think looking at this, you might think, we just have a pill, it's easy enough. But there are any number of questions that come up with even just pills. Of course, how often should I take it? Do I take it before a meal, after a meal? What do I do if I miss a dose? And these are things that communicating this very clearly is essential, which, of course, pharmaceutical companies understand I need to communicate how to take this medication. But from the patient's perspective, how do I make it as easy as possible for them to understand? And how do I become that resource to them, that if they have any questions, they know that, they have a trusted resource that they can get to, where I can either answer these questions for them or direct them to someone who is better able to assist them.
Absolutely. I think when we get to this one on the next PeopleMetrics Live, whenever we do that one, I think some of the data that we have on this are going to surprise people. You think that these are going to be home run scores, but maybe not.
Moving up the pyramid, it's all
right, let's see. Okay, after you get that taken care of, then what's next? Then it's an overall support system. So there are these three fundamental needs, but then patients need to feel like they have someone that they can rely on to get questions answered outside of these areas, right? A member of their team, if you will. And this is what Patient Support Services is, as well as patient forums and advocacy organizations that Patient Support Services can direct patients to. And it helps them to have the feeling, right, Kirk, that I'm not in this alone. There are others just like me who are going through this. I have an advocate for my case manager if it's a rare disease type drug, or I have lots of information at my fingertips digitally if it's not, or even if it is, the digital part is huge. And I can get all my questions answered that allow me to move on to the highest order need that I have that we'll get to in a second.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a couple things to note here on the support system. There is, as a patient, you want to have just a general sense of, I feel that, if I do have any questions, I know where I can go and I can get answers. Because especially today, if you have questions about kind of your condition and you search online, you're going to find any litany, any number of things that are right or wrong, or people with their own kind of opinions and suggestions. And so, the issue almost isn't, there's not enough information out there. The issue is, what can I rely on? What's actually, helpful to me, and to kind of distill this down into something that doesn't feel overwhelming, which, the wealth of information out there can be overwhelming, but to actually get to a source that I feel supported by. And that's really critical, which is,
Kirk, I just want to point out one thing. Folks who are in this business are probably looking at us and saying, well, there's certain questions I can't answer. And, patients are going to ask questions to my people that by law, we can't answer. But we hear that and we appreciate it, but there's the next level to that, correct?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's not about, what I'm saying is, just because you can't answer it, it doesn't mean that you can't provide them to a place that could.
Yes.
That's where I'm getting at.
Yeah. And I think, I've been in a lot of just rooms speaking with patients and hearing about the experience, not just within, pharmaceutical companies, but broadly in healthcare space. And often I think an issue you'll hear is that the patient is moving from kind of folks who have, their sphere of ownership of, see, to my doctor, and then to my insurance provider, and then perhaps to a specialist, and to my pharmaceutical company. And they're having to often bridge a lot of these gaps on their own, of kind of jump from one space to the next. And that's what can kind of cause a lot of confusion. And even just the act of helping to, you as a pharmaceutical company need to understand, I have a specific sphere of ownership. I am not your doctor, your insurance provider, but I can help direct you kind of where I'm capable, and kind of live within bounds of what I'm allowed to do, but still be helpful, rather than be this kind of brick wall that you hit as soon as you ask the wrong question, which it is important to understand. As a patient, they don't necessarily understand these spheres of ownership. They don't have a clear understanding of all the regulatory hurdles. So it's a matter of, how can I guide them through this as best I can.
And we've had clients where, we've gotten this feedback, and then they've changed their approach that they've used to answer questions from patients, to say, instead of saying, I can't legally answer this question, sorry, it's, I can direct you, I can't answer this question, but I can direct you to these resources that might be able to, and then they provide that. And that is so much better of an approach and a better experience for the patient, and will be better for them in the long run, and give them a better chance to onboard. So it's just things like that that are important to think about here.
And that's really crucial. And that's because when it comes to what we're recommending, it's not, break the law, forget what the regulations are. What we're saying is, be more of an off-ramp when patients have these needs, rather than a brick wall that they hit up against. And that's the key to being a support system.
That's a good way to put it. All right. And then once a patient feels supported, then it's the ultimate need is confidence. So the patients need to feel in their gut that, I'm ready to onboard and I'm prepared for treatment. And I'm confident that I've gotten all of my questions answered. I know how to administer this. I know where to get it. I know I can afford it. Yeah, now is the time that I'm going to go and begin my treatment journey. And that's really the ultimate need in the patient hierarchy of needs. And I would argue that's the ultimate goal of patient support services teams, whether they're digital, whether they're hubs, whether they're in-house with case managers. It's to help instill confidence in patients that they know everything they need to know to onboard onto a new medication.
Yeah, precise. And I think often when you hear from patients, it's worth keeping in mind, this broader lens. What they want to be able to do is just go on with their lives, not have to think about this stuff as much. And then, once you get that confidence in your own treatment, this confidence that Any questions I have will be answered. Any kind of changes in my day-to-day life can be accommodated. Then you have that confidence that not only can I kind of stick with my treatment, but I can move on with my day-to-day life, which is that ultimate goal. If you haven't, through your support, through your support services, given patients a sense in that confidence to go about kind of with their daily lives, then you've missed something here further down the chain that you need to really work and build your way up to.
So in future PeopleMetrics Lives, we'll be going through questions. So we have a total of 15 questions, Kirk, right, that go across these 5 needs. So there's 15 in total, not 15 per, just 15 total. And they break, there's a couple in each one, 3, 4 in each, for each need. And yeah, we'll go through what questions you need to ask, and we'll give you some kind of ranges of what we're seeing patients come in at on these various needs, and where pharma could definitely improve and where they're performing really, really well. So that those will be great sessions in the future.
Absolutely. Let me check. So we do have some just a question here where I think we have someone who brought up again kind of that there are some strict limits on what we can discuss with patients. I'll have you address this from a regulatory perspective. Right.
Yeah, I think it's sort of what we said is, getting a battery of what are those questions. And, the good news is, they're sort of known. Like we've been doing this so long, we kind of know what questions patients ask that you sort of can't answer. And then the key is to have an answer to their question of that off-ramp that you talked about. Like, where can they get these questions answered, right? Are they advocacy groups? Are they patient forums? Are there, what insurance, information you can direct them to? It's anticipating these questions and knowing which ones you can answer, and then having an answer to where they can get those answered, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think the way I think about it is I don't think it's rare, or it's almost never been the case for one of our clients where their inability to help a patient has been a strictly regulatory issue. It's generally that they see that there is this regulatory concern down the road, and so they have a fear of doing anything that can help patients, and so it's more of a mindset issue for a lot of these things. There's a lot you can do kind of within the bounds of what you're regulatorily capable of doing, and it's a matter of how have you kind of flush that out to make sure you're fully supporting patients within the bounds of what you're able to do. So,
exactly.
All right. Well, I think that's all we've got for today. So thank you again for joining us. Have a great rest of the day, and hope to see you again soon on another edition of PeopleMetrics Live. Bye all.
Bye.